My name is Ignacio Avila, and I'm the Principal's Tech Facilitator from the Whittier City School District. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for this session, Krista Johnson. She's been teaching in Tustin Unified for 16 years. She has taught kinder through third and has been using the workshop model in her classroom for 10 years. When our worlds were flipped upside down last year, she wanted to make sure that her students could still have some normalcy while she was still providing reading feedback and challenging them as readers. So she created a digital version of her conferring that she used to do with them in class in person. Krista will be presenting Conferring with readers virtually. I will be collecting your questions from the chat while Krista is presenting. She will address these questions at the end of her presentation. At that time, we'll have a Q&A session with her, and she'll address the questions for the last 15 minutes of this session. And now, Krista Johnson.
Thank you so much, Ignacio. I'm so excited to be here with all of you this morning to be able to share a little bit of resources that hopefully you'll be able to use in your classroom starting this week. And I'm just going to give you a little warning. I use Google Meet with my school district, so I've practiced, but hopefully Zoom is kind to me. It's just a little disclaimer. So we're going to be talking about conferring with readers virtually, which was very challenging. Everything was challenging when we started. So we're going to start off. Oh, here's my contact info. Sorry. Just this will all be available to you at the end, like Sharon had said. If you have any questions that you weren't able to get answered during this presentation or anything else, my email's on here. You can email me at any time and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So today we're going to first look at making those Just Right books available to our students and making them accessible to them so they are able to be reading them. Secondly, we're going to look at some resources we can use to help us gather our data and information during our conferences. And finally, we're going to look at a reader's toolbox that has the artifacts that we've provided for our students so they can refer back to them later when they're reading so they can continue working on those things that you've provided them. So like I mentioned, first, we're going to be talking about ways to make the Just Right books available to our students. So first, we're going to go over RazKids, then we're going to check out Epic, and then look at just good old projecting books. So I know RazKids is a paid service. Some districts have it available, some do not. That's the only downfall with RazKids, but we're going to go over that. Epic is free to everyone, and then everyone's projection system is a little bit different for what's available to you guys. So first we're going to look over RazKids and how you can use this as a tool to make those books accessible to your students. First of all, I was going to go over the setup. So when I read with my kiddos, I always have two computers because sometimes you get kicked off. You always want to make sure that you're still there. I use one. I have Google Meet. So I open Google Meet on both computers. I project the book and the presentation. And then on the other computer, sometimes I take my notes digitally. And as you can see here, I was going old school and I was just writing it on paper because we have conferences coming up. So I was just taking those notes to put somewhere else. So having the two computers, or you can use an iPad just so you can see them or take your notes, whatever version or way you would be doing that. So when you are in RazKids, when the book comes up, there are some tools that are available. Some of you may already know this, so it'll just be review. They can always go in if they're here that has a pen, a highlighter, and then there's a little notes here where they could like stop and jot, and they can do all of this on the pages. So like if you wanted them, if they were reading at home, they could highlight the word, like sight words they were looking for, they could circle words they didn't know. So this year we kind of started using those tools. I didn't use that last year when they had the free version available. But those have been something that are helpful. So we're going to go ahead and go into, I have to move that, into RazKids real quick. So when you have, if you do have RazKids, or if you don't, if you have it available and haven't tried it, you just go in and you, your kiddos will log on, and when you open it, it opens, oh, hold on. Let me go back. I don't know why. There's so many little Sorry, the boxes of pictures go on top of my screen. I apologize. Who did not have that? So when it opens up, the reading room will pop up. So they just click on that, or if you're conferring with them. So I click on this for them. So I open up the reading room. There are some books that are at their just right level. I let them choose. So let's say she chose to read Carlos and His Teacher. We'll go to read. And then they do have the quizzes available. When I'm conferring one-on-one with them, I don't always have time to get to the quizzes, but they do go back and do the quizzes later. So I would just turn the pages and then they would read to me as we go, and I would jot my notes down. So that's how I would provide the Just Right books for using Raz Kids. So I would provide it to do conferring with them, and then also they can use it during reading workshop time if they're learning virtually, or they could also do it as part of their homework to have those books available to them at their Just Right level. Okay. So next we're going to look at Epic. So like I said, Raz Kids is a paid service that is available to most districts, not every district. Sometimes districts use it just for like your red hot or struggling readers. Next, we're going to look at Epic, which I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with. It is free. And I set up just the same way as I do with Raz Kids. I have the Google Meet open, or your Zoom open on both computers. So I can see while I'm presenting the screen to them, and then they will read to me and I jot my notes down. Then you can also go into each student and see how many books they've read, how many hours they've read, the last book they've read. You can see if they've read a book for like 10 seconds. He went in to look at that and then decided he didn't want to read it because I asked him about it. So if you see a kiddo, it shows they've opened like a ton of books with like that, you could like have a conference about that and be like, oh, what's going on? Like, how come you're not able to finish a book? So there is a lot of information that Epic does provide for you. It also has some options and tools. So if I'm reading The Dot with Dylan, for instance, and we get through a couple pages and our time's up, I will put a heart on here and favorite it so he can go back and finish it later. And then there are also questions available for most books. There are not questions available for all books. So if you wanted your student to have that option of having information regarding like comprehension and whatnot, you would just want to check before you assigned them a book, making sure it had questions. So you can assign them books, you can favorite the books, and then they can go back later and complete those questions. The other thing that Epic allows you to do is create groups. So after you've conferred with your kiddos individually, you could easily create a strategy group and then assign that group, like say you wanted to assign them Rosie Revere, so you guys could use it as a mentor text to go through your teaching points that you wanted to do to teach into that group. So you would just hit create group. It allows you to give the group a name. So you just name it like, I don't know, unicorns or something. And then you would just select what students you wanted in there and then you wanted to be in that group, and you would be able to go in later and assign a book, and you could bring it up when you guys are doing strategy groups. So those are some options for using Epic, and that one is a free option during school hours. So like if they did want to read on it on the weekend, they aren't able to. I did have a kiddo's mom, Dojo, message me saying they said they can only read until 3, like, and they didn't believe them, so they obviously asked me. I said, yeah, it's because it's a free service. So if they want to keep reading, they can go on Raz Kids because we had that available. So next we're going to look at just being able to project a book. Like if you wanted to do a running record, I know in my district, we're using Literably right now, which I've used before as a great tool for informal running records. Now for our kiddos who have those really soft-spoken voices, who are not like next to the iPad when they're reading, you know, all those little things that can happen when you're reading into an iPad. It doesn't always give them an accurate score. So I have used the Osmo projector app and Osmo because our schools that or if your school does have like a STEM lab or STEAM lab, innovation lab, they might have those around, and it's much easier to take that back and forth than any type of camera. I know in class I have a document camera, some schools have Elmo, so you would just literally, I just busted out a book that I wanted to read with a kiddo, and this one I'm actually doing at school, but I didn't want the whole class to see what we were doing since we were doing reading workshops. So I just held up the book to do an actual running record and projected it to them that way. So that's another way. And then you can show any book you wanted if you had access to some type of projection device, or like if you had one at home. But the Osmo was pretty easy, and it had less technological problems than like one that I had plugged in my computer. So that is how we can make books available to our students at their just right reading level. Now we're going to talk about how we can gather our data, and if we don't have all of our papers and everything with us, how we can use it on the computer. So I created a Conferring notebook virtually. And I always start with a schedule, and I always hope that I'm going to meet with all of my kids and nothing's going to happen and interrupt us. But we all know that, obviously it doesn't always happen. So I also color code my kids based upon their needs. So my kiddo that's pink, I know I need to meet with him at the beginning of the week and the end of the week. Wednesday is blank because I have a different schedule. I either meet with them one-on-one on Wednesday, or we do our strategy groups if I've already conferred with everyone. So I also have an AM PM group, and I'm teaching distance learners and in-person learners simultaneously. So conferring one-on-one is much easier on Wednesday versus like trying to confer with someone on the computer while everyone else is in class. So an example of what that would look like is literally just to try and get everyone in. It's just like a quick check-in. And I meet with half of them one Wednesday, half of them another Wednesday, and I jot down their notes on my conferring page. As you can see, I still do use my paper one. I do not do everything digitally. I still am, I guess, old school and use paper, because sometimes it's just easier to jot it down than like type it and get it out. And then technology isn't working like for me today, then, sometimes it's easier to do that. So then I would write down my conferring notes. And then when we were in person, I had it all on paper, but I also color code my conferring notes, because if I want to see my red hots, like I have like 4 red hots, there's a red. So instead of like shuffling through all my papers, I'm like, oh, red, red, red. I need to meet with these kids real quick. I've only met with them once this week. Or I see my green kiddos. Oh, I could skip them this week. So it's just easier way to use an organizational tool that's very visual. So I'm just like, oh, I need to pick it, instead of like searching through folders and whatever I might have for all of my kids for their data collection. Then after I've conferred one-on-one, I create my strategy groups. And like I had mentioned, you can create groups in Epic, and you can use a mentor text, and we might read a book together, or I may have assign a book the day before, and we will talk about it and talk about some things that we have been working on in our strategy group. I always like to have my teaching points for my strategy groups jotted down ahead of time, just so I'm not like, and don't get me wrong, I do still do tons of stuff on the fly, but like if I've met with them and I've like circled different things, I wrote their name down, I know like, okay, group number 1, we're working on scooping our words, making sure we're not sounding so robotic. And then my higher group, like we're really working on summarizing like our stories. So it just kind of helps me to stay a little bit organized. And then even when I do a strategy group, I provide them with an artifact to put in their toolbox so that they have it, so I can kind of pre-plan those ahead of time, just to save myself a little bit of time. These are also some other strategy group tools I use. So these are not digital, they are paper form. So when you get the resources, you could click on these and print them. I do always like having a reading level one, so I can grab like all of my K kiddos to teach up into L, or grab all of my N reados and teach up into O. It's just helpful to immediately grab different strategy groups by level as well. Now, after I have read with them individually or in strategy groups, this is where I provide them their artifacts. So they have a toolkit, which used to be a piece of paper in a sleeve that was in their reading bag that had their Post-its on it, but they weren't able to take anything home with them, so they didn't have it. And like I didn't have it in Seesaw, so I created it in Seesaw. So this year we've only done it digitally. So each time they read with me, I provide them with an artifact. Now there are tons of things you can use online. You could grab pictures, you can make like a digital little book, but once you have it in Seesaw, you can't just like quickly add it. Sometimes I will draw it and take a picture immediately. So what I did is all my artifacts that I use like frequently, I snapped a picture and I put them into a seesaw activity. So here's Emma, and I read with her. And anytime I read with them and there's something that I do want to use as an artifact, I put a little box around it. So I know that I'm going to put scooping words and reading part by part in her toolbox. So when I go to the seesaw, I am going to add those into her toolbox. Now for each kiddo, I did leave every artifact that I have like pre-made in there because it's kind of a good tool for them to have for other things to think of and reflect on that they may want to practice or remind them to do during their reading. So those are all in there. And like I said, if it's something that I don't have on here, I will just draw it real quick, snap a picture, and then add it within Seesaw as well. There's a close-up of just, so she's at the beginning was working on stretchy snake saying it each sound, and now she's moved on to part by part. So she's growing, but she's still working on sounding out those tricky words. Now we also have some of our readers who need to be challenged more, but at the beginning of the year, we went over reading like a scholar, using the depth and complexity icons. So different ways to stop and jot and think about our books. So each icon we went through and did a deep dive into. So these are, and I added this in there because I'm not sure, you guys may already know this. If not, here you go. Depth and complexity icons are a Chrome extension, and you add it to your Google bar, your Chrome bar, and you click on it and it just pops them up and you just copy it into whatever you want. There's no more searching. There's no more snipping. It's amazing. Like I wish I had it like 7 years ago. It was great. That was just a side note. But the artifacts for depth and complexity and stopping and jotting are red because when they're thinking, they know red, okay, I need to stop here. Sometimes with my higher readers, they just read, and they're not stopping and thinking. So we may even pre-plan our stopping points, right? So we may use some red Post-its and stop where we need to pre-plan. So those are just some ways that we can challenge them, and they can use these in their readers' notebooks as well. So here we have Dylan. He's been working on stopping and thinking. He had some connections. He's going to continue to think about his reading. And with him, we really needed to plan ahead. So it's really hard to find red Post-its, but we have some weird random flower ones. And I put he decides where he's going to stop and think ahead of time. So then he's like, oh, wait, I think about it. And then he jots it down in his reader's notebook. Here's an example of his toolbox. So he was still working on some of the other strategies. And then for stopping and thinking, he picked which ones he wanted, and I added connections because he just needed to kind of think about, we were working on comparing books. So there's an example of how to incorporate those as well. When I do incorporate the stop and jot, I always do add the stop and think, so they know, oh, they're stopping and thinking about those types of things. So there's a close-up of his that doesn't have all of it. But again, like I said, having all of it on there helps them think as readers in different ways and may prompt them to think about something they might not have before. So next, the good part, now let's see if this is going to be kind to me because I have to click on some stuff, are the resources that are going to be available to you after this. So here is the Conferring notebook digitally. So everything that I talked about. I just have to say it is very bizarre to just keep talking and nobody say anything or see anyone. So hopefully it's all working. So when you go in here, it has the blank schedule for you, some notes pages, the strategy group page, the images, these pages if you wanted to print them out, the Conferring page, which also the Conferring page, you'll see on the sides of the pages, there is a paper version, so I linked a PDF. So like if you click here, it'll take you to that so you can print it. So there's goodies hidden within. So you'll just kind of have to explore. So for the toolbox, there's the Seesaw activity as well as a PDF if you wanted to print the toolbox. Artifacts available to use however you want, if you wanted to use them. If you are in person and you have the toolbox printed out, in class, I put the habits page on the back, because let's say they were using Stretchy Snake. They're awesome at sounding out words. Now it's a habit and they do that as a reader. They don't necessarily need to practice it, but you don't want them to forget it either. So I stick it on the back because now it's become a habit. The stop and think like a scholar options. And then for depth and complexity, here's one more resource built within for those kiddos that you want to think a little bit deeper. Megan Venencia, who's also presenting at our conference today, she created these slides, and then I created the activities. If you follow her on Twitter, you will not be disappointed. She has so many goodies that she shares out. She's our SEL TOSA right now. So each one of these, you could even do this as a slides activity in Google, or you could do a Seesaw activity. Each one, if you click, you see each one has a Seesaw activity available. So those are linked within as well. And then the artifacts for the depth and complexity. So this is what the Seesaw activity looks like. You can also click on it in here, the depth and complexity. And then the last thing I was going to share with you, this is not necessarily for Just Right Books, but I don't know if anyone or you guys have heard of Books. If you're using it, they offer a free trial, but they're really good like read alouds that are like kind of brought to life. So like the pictures move, and one thing that's really cool is each word like is highlighted as you go. I'm afraid to hop to another website because it's going to do something, but you guys could click on here and check it out. If you wanted to do a free trial, it does it for a year. There's a lot of SEL books in here. There's a lot of monthly books in here. There were books for Black History Month. So yeah, that is all of the information I have.
What we can do is if you have a question and you want to ask Krista, you can do a little icon and do a reaction and raise your hand that way. And then I'll go ahead and call on you. But as far as the questions go right now, one of the questions was from Tara, is a toolbox and Post-it, is it digital? And I think you answered that question.
Yes,
yeah, she did.
Oh.
Thanks.
Okay.
And then the name, the Twitter link, what was the name on Twitter? I believe Venezia.
Mine or Megan's? Megan Venencia's is listed in the depth and complexity sites because I wanted to make sure I gave her credit for creating those. So her Twitter handle's in there. Mine was on the second slide. I don't know which one they were asking about.
And another question was, did you have to buy the depth and complexity extensions? And if so,
No.
where?
No, the link that's in the slides, you literally click on it. It's going to take you to the Chrome extension. It asks you if you're a teacher. I think you had to put your email in. It sends you something, and then it adds it to your toolbar.
Okay, so I think at this point, we'll take questions for Krista. If you want to raise your hand, if you want to unmute.
Add something about the RazKid resource that is my favorite feature.
Sure.
So I use RazKids for their assessment piece. I don't know if you're familiar with that component, but you can do you can assign the kids a particular level, and you have 4 text options that you can choose for them to take the test. And when they take the test, it records them. So I can go back and actually annotate on a running record. So it provides a running record. And what I love about that particular part of it is that it scores for you the running record. So it'll give you their accuracy rate, their fluency speed, their errors. You annotate the type of errors they're making. It gives you a really nice printout of their running record. And so you can use that RazKids assessment like for other, like if we use LLI at my school, the Fontans and Pinnell. So I really love that feature. It's that assessment piece, and I do it side by side with my kids digitally.
No, I was just going to say that Shelly was talking about how she uses a RazKids.
Awesome.
And
yeah, it
then,
has so many options and tools, and it's really great if your district has it available.
So one of the questions was if you had resources for upper grades.
You can use it for any grade. I'm teaching 2nd and 3rd grade. Like what kind of resource? Like a conferring resource or the toolbox? I'm not sure who asked.
I believe it was Cindy.
I asked it, and I was just thinking that like the artifacts that, because a lot of those are a little too,
Right.
Beginning reader.
Right. So those ones are just basically what I have been using. So they are more primary grades. But depending on if your district uses like Lucy Calkins, like the units of study and different things, our district snapped and snipped some of the different artifacts that she has in there and have compiled them based upon grade level. Also using the Saravallo strategy toolbox, strategies and tools book for readers. There are more available in there as well to use. And I have used that before where I've just turned to a page and snapped a picture of it and uploaded it. But yeah, most of mine are geared more towards the 2nd and 3rd grade. So at this moment, I don't have like some already pre-drawn for like 4th and 5th grade.
Oh, that's good. That was a good, I didn't think about taking photos of like Jennifer Saravallo's and putting them onto Seesaw. That's
yes, totally. So like, even if I'm like in the moment conferring, like I always have that book by me and I'm like, oh, I need to go to this page, whatever. And I'll snap a picture and then that becomes their artifact. So it doesn't like, it always doesn't have to be something beautiful and fancy, right? It just is something that's going to be purposeful and useful to get that kiddo the tools that they need to help them be successful.
So there was another question from Mrs. Rodriguez. It says here, you seem to use small groups for most of the day. How is your daily schedule structured to get to everything?
I actually, Wednesdays we're at home. So that's the only reason that I had the small group. So our daily schedule is, so I have a combo. So my AM class is 2nd grade. My PM class is 3rd grade. And we start at 8:20 and we leave at 10:50. And then that's our synchronous time. And then they have asynchronous time. So when we first get there, we do like a morning meeting. We have like a joke of a day. We do a puzzlement activity. And then we do reading workshop for about 30 minutes, which like kills me because it's so short. But I do that for about 30 minutes. Then I do writing workshop for about 30 minutes. And then we do math and then they're gone. So it's just like, bam, wham, thank you, ma'am. Here you go. Bye. So it's really hard to get all of it in. So on Wednesdays, we are all distance learning. We're all online. So from 9 to 9:45, we meet with our class. And then after that is when I have small group, like strategy groups planned. During the day though, I don't really have on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I don't have time for small groups because it's such a short time. But Wednesdays we have more time to strategically plan those things out.